I never told anyone about this before, not in full detail at least. Every time I tried, people either laughed, rolled their eyes, or told me I just had a nightmare. But what I went through wasn't a dream. It wasn't a trick of the mind. It was real, and it nearly destroyed me. It began 5 years ago, when I moved into a small rented house just outside of town. I'd been desperate to leave my old apartment. Loud neighbors, constant sirens, paper-thin walls. The house wasn't much, but it was cheap and it had what I wanted most. Silence. Or so I thought. The first few nights passed quietly enough. I slept better than I had in months. But on the fourth night something woke me. At first, I thought it was just the wind. The sound was faint, like a long, drawn-out moan, rising and falling. I sat up in bed, straining my ears. It wasn't coming from outside. It was in the house. I told myself it was the pipes. Old houses creak, right? I tried to sleep again, but the sound wouldn't stop. Every few minutes it came back, a soft groan moving through the walls. By 3 a.m., I was sitting upright, blanket clutched to my chest, convinced that someone else was in the house with me. The next morning, I searched every corner. Attic, basement, closets, nothing. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. But the next night the sound returned. Louder, longer. This time, it came from the hallway just outside my bedroom. I froze, every nerve in my body screaming not to move. The moan grew sharper, closer, until it was just beyond my door. And then 3 soft knocks. I didn't sleep at all that night. The morning light didn't bring relief. It only made me feel more foolish. Sitting there, blanket wrapped tight, staring at the bedroom door like a paranoid child, I kept telling myself it's just the house settling. It's nothing. You're overtired. But when I finally got up and opened the door, I froze. On the floor, right outside my bedroom, lay 3 small scratches. Thin, shallow grooves carved into the wooden boards. Perfectly parallel. Perfectly fresh, I touched them. The wood splintered under my fingers. They hadn't been there before. That entire day, I couldn't focus on anything. Every creak, every hum of the refrigerator made my pulse jump. By nightfall, I was debating whether to sleep at a motel, but I told myself I couldn't run from my own house. If I started doing that, I'd never stop. So I stayed. And once again, sometime after midnight, the sound came. Louder this time. A groaning, dragging noise like someone pulling something heavy along the hallway. I held my breath, ears straining, eyes fixed on the door. The dragging stopped, and then came the knocks. 3 of them. I whispered into the silence. "Who's there?" For a moment, nothing. Then, from the other side of the door, in a voice that didn't sound human at all, came a single word. Me. I don't remember leaping from the bed. I don't remember grabbing my phone or running down the stairs barefoot. All I remember is standing outside on the lawn, cold night air burning my lungs, staring up at the dark windows of the house. I called the police. 2 officers arrived, searched the place top to bottom. Nothing, no sign of forced entry. No footprints, no intruders, no explanation. They gave me the same tired speech about old houses and nerves, and left. But I knew. Something was inside that house with me, and it knew my name. After those knocks, the house felt different, like a living thing that had shifted in its sleep and now watched me with more awareness than it had before. I found myself flinching at ordinary noises, the water heater kicking on, a draft slipping through a cracked sash, the far-off bark of someone's dog down the street. Everything was a signal now. Everything could mean the house was thinking about me. A few days later, I started noticing small changes. Not dramatic. Not at first, but wrong in a way that made the back of my neck prickle. The mug I kept on the kitchen counter would be on the dining table. A pair of socks left by the bed would be folded neatly at the end of the couch. I'd set my keys on the hallway hook and then find them on top of the refrigerator. At first, I blamed absent-mindedness. I got up at odd hours. I left things in pockets. I was tired. But the pattern spread, and the errors became specific. A photograph on the mantel, my sister and me at a lake, would be turned face down. The Bible I'd taken from the nightstand and tucked into a drawer was left open on page I didn't recognize. Once, my phone was placed on the kitchen counter with the camera app open, staring back at me like an accusation. The worst was the smell. There was a scent that threaded through the house sometimes, impossible to identify. It wasn't rotten, not exactly. Not like mold or decay. It had a metallic edge and something sweeter beneath it, like sugar burned in an oven. It would come and go, lingering in rooms for minutes at a time, and whenever it hung in the air, the hairs on my arms would stand up. I told myself I was being paranoid, and I tried to prove I wasn't. I installed a cheap motion sensor camera, one of those battery jobs you can stick in a corner and forget about. It was ridiculous and petty, but at least the footage would give me proof if I needed to show someone later. I set it, facing the hallway, and left it recording all night, clunky and obvious in the dim corner. That night I slept like a man who finally gave up trying to stay awake. Exhaustion rolled over me so hard it flattened out the fear. I woke at 3 in the morning because my phone buzzed. A notification from the camera app. There was motion. I rolled over, heart thudding, and opened the footage on my phone without thinking. The timestamp read 2:13 a.m. At 2:12 a.m. The hallway was empty. The moonlight painted silver across the floorboards. Then, out of the corner of the frame, something moved. At first it looked like a shadow, a dark smear gliding along the baseboard. It elongated, reached up as if something with long arms pressed itself along the wall. The motion blurred, unnatural and stilted. A sound came through the phone's playback, not recorded by the camera but layered on top. A thin, wavering tone like a bell struck gently and then held. For 3 seconds the hallway was black. Then light spilled into the frame. The bedroom door, which had been closed when I fell asleep, creaked open by itself. The sleep-scraped me sat forward on the couch, hands tight around the phone, breath shallow. I scrolled ahead. At 2:13, the camera caught a figure moving down the hall. Not a human shape, not really, but the suggestion of a person. A blur that pooled at the edges as if seen through dirty glass. It stopped directly in front of the camera, and for a heart-stopping second I watched it tilt its head. The audio overlay scratched and bent into a whisper. The figure lifted what might have been a hand and pressed it to the lens. On screen, the light from the camera reflected off the mark it left. A thumbprint, darker than the hallway like soot on glass. My phone buzzed in my hand. A message. From an unknown number. One line. Don't be afraid. We only want company. I don't remember deciding to stay. I suppose the brain has a way of making choices after the fact when fear takes control. I watched the footage again and again until the first glow of sun pushed into the room and my eyes stung with the effort. The footage did not lie. Not if digital pixels can be said to be honest. Something had been in my house. Something that could show up on a cheap camera and leave a mark like a fingerprint of soot. For the next 3 days, I kept the footage secret. I uploaded it to the cloud and watched it over and over like someone examining the bones of a dream for clues. When I tried to explain the clip to friends, their faces closed politely. Maybe it's a draft or an insect, right? Maybe bad wiring, the camera glitching. All reasonable explanations. They wanted them to be true. I wanted them to be true. I wanted them so badly I could taste it. But I knew what I'd seen. The door opening by itself. The smear at the lens. That single text. The house didn't stop after that. It escalated in details that felt personal, like a stalker learning my routine. It would ring the landline at exactly 3:03 a.m. the old phone's mechanical ring cutting through the dark like a warning. When I answered, there was always silence, until the click of the handset was followed by a breath. Once it wasn't a breath at all, but a sound like wind in an abandoned shaft. Several times the answering machine recorded faint sounds, the soft sliding of luggage, how a person sounds when they take off a coat, the rustle of fabric. No footsteps, no voices, but the movement of an absence. Shadow people began to appear at the edges of my vision, not fully formed, but enough to be disorienting. I'd be making coffee and on the stove's reflection catch a flicker, a silhouette standing behind me with its head cocked. I'd spin, and there'd be nothing. The film of shadows pooled in mirrors even when I'd covered them. The shapes were visible through the coverings like a bruise under the skin. On one afternoon, when the rain battered the windows and the house smelled of wet earth, I went into the attic. It was an act of defiance or perhaps indulgence. The attic was dusty, full of the old landlord's furniture and boxes of papers. I turned on the flashlight and moved slowly, breathing in the attic's dry air. Halfway in, I saw, propped against an old trunk, a child's suitcase. It was ridiculous. Faded stickers from a long-ago fair, a frayed handle. The air around it was colder. I don't have a reason for why I opened it. Curiosity, perhaps. A need to look into every corner now because every corner might contain the next sign. Inside was a single item, a train schedule. Not any modern fold-out, an old brittle paper timetable, months yellowed. The dates on the page were wrong, impossible. They were from decades before I was born. And scrawled across the margins was a name in a looping young hand. Ethan. My name. Not my real name, Ethan, but the same letters. My mouth went dry. I dropped the schedule like I'd been burned. That night, as if waiting for my hand to tremble and my soul to tighten in my chest, the knocks began again. 3, slow, deliberate, no more than a foot from my bedside. But the sound was deeper now, echoing up from the floorboards like someone hammering beneath the surface of the world. I lay there and said nothing, because saying anything felt like agreeing to a contract. When the knocks stopped, a voice, papery, as if spoken through a sheet, whispered my name. This voice was not the same as the one that had said, me. It was older, layered with 100 other voices in the way a chorus blends. It said, boarding starts tonight. Something clattered in the hallway. A suitcase rolling, the slow drag of metal wheels over wood. For the first time since I'd had the house, sick with a need I didn't understand, I listened to the sound of my own skin crawl and knew what the house wanted. I slept in the car that night, the engine's faint hum comfortingly automatic. I told myself I would leave in the morning, but even then, even with my keys in my hand, the house's presence reached out. When I walked to the front door, I thought I saw, in the reflection of the storm-darkened glass, a man in an old uniform standing behind me. When I spun, heart pounding, he was not there. But the reflection remained, patient and impossible, and in his hand what looked like a ticket, yellowed and worn, a small square of paper, my name printed on it in cramped handwriting. I left. I drove up and down streets until the sun rose and the town pulled its blinds and exhibitions of normal life blinked awake. I went to work, pretended the day was ordinary, forced myself to laugh at things that would have been funny weeks earlier. When night came, there was a pull that ran farther than the distance between my hands and my keys. It felt like a thread tied around my wrist being pulled, slowly, inexorably. And when I returned to the house, because of course I returned, the front door was ajar. The front door hung open like an invitation, not ajar the way a gust leaves things amiss, but fully, patient, deliberate, as if it had only been waiting for me to come back so it could show me what it wanted. The porch light swung gently, though there was no wind, and the yellow bulb cast the entryway in a soft, compromised glow that made the shadows look thinner, like paper cutouts on a stage. I should have turned away. I should have driven until my phone battery died and the sun burned the edges of the night away. Instead, I walked through the doorway. The house greeted me with warmth that had nothing to do with comfort. It smelled of coal and old fabric, of steam room breath. The hallway seemed longer than it had before, an architectural lie made real. My keys dropped from my hand and sparkled on the floor like a confession. I bent to pick them up, and for the first time I noticed the sound. A low, rhythmic rumbling, so subtle it might have been imagined if it weren't for the way it made my gums ache when I swallowed. Like rails, like something running farther down under the bones of the earth. I moved as if underwater, each step dragging me toward the living room where, from the doorway, the room beyond had become a platform. Candles, dozens of them, ringed the floor in a shallow circle. Their flames were steady, unmoving, like lights seen through the fog of a window. And there they were. At the edge of the candlelight, lined up like commuters waiting for a late-night rush, the shapes stood. They were dressed in older styles. Coats with collars turned up against some long-ago cold, hats with brims. They carried luggage, small suitcases, a battered hat box, a trunk the size of a coffee table. Their faces were pale in the candlelight, and when they turned, their eyes were the most wrong thing of all. Not hollow, not quite empty, but with a wet, glassy sheen as if something had filmed over them. I should have run. I should have slammed the door, set the house on fire, done anything. Instead, my feet carried me forward. It wasn't courage. It felt like gravity. The world sloped toward the center of the ritual, and I was the loose thing rolling. They did not speak at first. They only watched. The hush in the room pressed into my chest. A single voice, thin as a paper-edged wind, said, "Boarding." A man in uniform stepped from the shadows. He wore a conductor's suit that looked like it belonged in an old newsreel. Brass buttons, bright as teeth. He tipped his cap at me, and when he spoke his voice was an old thing, thick with coal and lacquer. "We are on time," he said. "There is room." My mouth moved uselessly. "Why me?" I managed. This is my house." He smiled then, a slow spreading of lips that belonged in a mirror you avoid. "It always becomes that," he said. "A station, a saving place. The train must be fed. We are hungry, and you were listening." One of the passengers, a woman with a lace collar and the air of someone who had once been rich enough to be bored, stepped forward. She held out a hand. In it was a small yellow slip of paper, the kind you get for a coat check or a ticket stub, edges rounded by time. My name was written on it in ink that hadn't dried. I shook my head. "I won't go." My voice sounded thin even to me. Maybe it was a lie I told to myself. The conductor's eyes gleamed. "No one wants to. We do not force, we offer. The offer is what matters." He gestured at the passengers like a proud host. Companionship always softens the ride. Someone behind me whispered, and the voice was mine for a second, an echo that knew the back-of-the-throat sounds I made when afraid. "Come on board." The candlelight did strange things. It made the players look like stage actors, like they could step away at a curtain call and reveal a crew of mortals. But when one of them moved, the motion was wrong. Too smooth, too slow, as if performed in film that had been slowed down. No one blinked. No one breathed. They watched me like an audience looks at a magician's assistant, waiting to see what trick will fail. "You can stay," the conductor said, "but you will find the house is not content to remain a house. It will show you the tracks under the floor, the thunder under sleep, the smell of iron. And night after night it will ask the same small favor. Bring us one more." I realized I had been chosen not because I was special, but because I could be used, because the house needed a link between what it took and where it took it. A recruit, a herald, a hand to place a ticket on the tongue of someone unsuspecting. A passenger, a man with a cap pulled tight, stepped forward and pressed the ticket into my palm. The paper was warm as if just printed. Ink soaked into skin in a pattern that felt like a brand. On my name there were numbers underneath. A date that was about to happen. No, I said again, or maybe that was the last of my voice before it was swallowed. My heart beat so loud I could feel it in my temples. Something in the room stirred. An almost imperceptible shift, as if the entire house leaned forward. The conductor's smile creased into something like understanding. He tipped his hat slightly. "We will come for you if you will not come yourself," he said. "But we prefer the procession. It makes the stopping easier. Do your duty, and the ride is kinder." I thought of doors, of windows, of the cheap locksmith who replaced my deadbolt. I thought of the police officers' skeptical faces. I thought of the camera footage, the thumbprint at the lens. I thought of the schedule in the attic with my name in the margin in a child's hand. And beneath all that, deeper than the arguments I could make, a small, frantic voice asked, "Which part of you will be taken if you refuse? Your body, your hours, your breath?" There was a thump at the back of the house. A luggage wheel rolling like a slow insect. The whisper moved through the room like a wind through an open ledger. "Boarding begins now." I stumbled back, feet hitting a coffee table. The passenger with the lace collar turned her head and peered at my face. Something like pity or hunger glimmered there. "We will treat them kindly," she murmured. "We will tell them there is somewhere better. They always go willingly if you tell them it is true." My knees gave way. I slid back on the floor, and the ticket fell from my hand and flipped over, revealing the fine print in tiny letters I could not read without squinting. A ticket is a promise. A promise is a tether. The conductor rested a hand on his hip. "You have until midnight," he said. "After that, the train moves without hesitation." Time had become a thing that could be trimmed like paper. Midnight meant nothing except the soft point of commitment. My watch read 10:37. I thought about calling someone. My sister, anyone. But numbers faded from my head like a fever. The house hummed. The candles were stars, patient and immovable. Outside the window I could hear the faint echo of a horn, like a pack animal summoning its mates. The world beyond the glass felt distant as a story. When the passengers began to step forward as if toward an unseen platform, the motion snapped me into action. I scrambled to my feet, grabbing the first thing at hand, the crowbar I had used to pry the wall years before, and I swung it at the nearest figure. It made a hollow thunk and passed through as if through smoke. My hands smacked its shoulder and my fingers found nothing to hold. The sound it made was not flesh or wood, but a thin, metallic ring, like a bell struck on its edge. They did not flinch. They did not change. They simply moved around me, a procession folding into themselves like a river accepting a tributary. I ran. I ran to the door and pulled it shut, but my fingers slipped on the knob as if the handle had been polished by 100 rubs of ghost skin. I pushed, slammed, locked, did every ridiculous human thing that keeps a child safe from the dark. The door did not budge. From the other side came the soft, patient tapping of shoes on wood. The house itself seemed to breathe around me, inhaling the space and holding it. A scratch at the threshold, slow and patient. Then a pause. Then 3 confident knocks. My hands were shaking so hard they could not turn the deadbolt. The wood under my palms felt like bark. The knocks came again, and when the voice said my name I had to close my eyes not to scream. "You can come with us," the conductor said through the door, his breath fogging the glass. "Or you can watch us bring them in. Both are work." I could not decide what was worse, being taken or being forced to watch. My throat constricted and my eyes burned. At that moment, I saw the ticket on the floor, its corners stained black where the candle soot had pressed into the paper. And beneath it, in the way of thoughts that never show up in daylight, a remembered action slid up from some place I could not name. Once, in a convenience store at midnight, I had helped a weary man load his suitcase into the trunk. He had smelled like coal and cheap perfume. He'd smiled a sad, grateful smile and said, "Don't let the house win." At the time, it had seemed like a joke. Now, it was a plea. Midnight moved with the confidence of a hand closing a lid. The conductor's voice softened. "Decide," he said. And for the first time since this began, the wind outside rose. It pushed at the house, rattling panes. The candles flickered and threw the faces into new angles. I picked the ticket up with fingers that felt hollow. The ink looked like a map of veins. The numbers beneath my name were the small thing it took to claim me. There is no noble end to this. I did not heroically bash the door and run until the sun burned my back. I am not a man of novels, and my body was not made for miracles. What I did, what any person might do when faced with the impossible, was bargain. I stood in the doorway with the ticket in my hand and asked for time. More than that, I asked for the smallest kindness I had left. "You want a promise," the conductor said. "Make it," I thought, fast and stupid and animal. I promised a thing I thought would save me. I promised I would bring someone else in exchange. A lie, a theft, a choice wrapped in shame. I promised I would deliver one name to them, someone I loved in exchange for my freedom. It was despicable and raw and real, and when I spoke the words, the candles did not flicker. They leaned in. The conductor's smile softened to something like satisfaction. The door unlatched. They did not take me then. They allowed me 10 days, a compass point. Part of me, the part that pretended to be reasoning, the part that loved reason, whispered that it was a trick. Of course it was. But the house wanted me to leave. The procession wanted me to walk away with a ticket in my pocket and a promise in my mouth. They wanted me to carry the obligation outward, to seat it into someone else so the train could call them home. I left that night with the ticket in my wallet and the scent of coal in my clothes. I drove and parked and did not sleep. When morning came, I went to work like a man who had been anesthetized. No one in the office noticed the dark ring around my iris or the way my hands trembled as I typed. No one looked at the ticket. The house waited. It almost seemed content, and beneath that, in the small private part of me I still tried to call a soul, I felt the first roots of guilt settle, fertile and slow as ivy. I didn't sleep that first night after the bargain. I sat in the driver's seat until the sunrise turned the windshield into a slab of molten gold, and every honk and engine backfire sounded like a horn calling from the tracks beneath my skin. 10 days. That was the deal. 10 days to deliver someone else, or the house would come for me. I thought the promise I made was nothing more than desperate words. Something said to buy me seconds, like a man offering his wallet to a thief. But the ticket in my pocket burned. Every time I reached for it, I could feel the edges warm and sharp as if the paper itself had teeth. I told myself I wouldn't do it, that I'd find a way to break the cycle, that no living soul deserved to be dragged onto that phantom platform. But by day 2, the guilt had already begun to rot me from the inside. The first signs at work, people noticed. My coworker, Jenna, leaned over my desk and said, "Rough night," with a sympathetic smile. Her perfume was faintly floral, grounding. For half a second I felt human again. But then the thought slithered in, uninvited. She's alone, isn't she? No one would notice right away if she went missing. The thought wasn't mine. It felt like it had been slid into my skull by invisible fingers. I dropped my coffee mug. It shattered across the tile. Jenna jumped back startled, and I mumbled apologies I didn't mean. The rest of the day, every face in the office seemed to blur. I saw not colleagues, not friends, but passengers in waiting. The shapes of their shoulders mirrored the silent figures I'd seen lined up in my living room. The sound of staplers and printers carried the same rhythm as train wheels grinding metal. The house follows. I tried staying away from my house, sleeping in cheap motels. It didn't matter. On the third night, the hum followed me. The faint vibration under the bed, like steel rails humming just beneath the floor. The lamp flickered in time with it until the light bulb popped. When I looked in the mirror, I swore I saw the conductor standing just behind me, cap low, brass buttons gleaming. But when I spun, there was only darkness. The mirror glass seemed slightly fogged, like someone had breathed on it. I drove back to the house out of desperation. Maybe to confront it. Maybe to beg. When I opened the front door, the ticket in my pocket pulsed once, like a heartbeat. The living room was empty of passengers. No candles. No luggage. Just silence. But on the wall, scrawled in a dark, greasy substance, was a new message. 8 days, the temptation. By day 4, the whispering began. I'd sit at my desk, pretending to answer emails, and hear it right beneath the surface of my thoughts. A voice smooth as velvet, patient as a toll collector. Choose. It will be easier. They will be grateful. Their suffering is brief. Sometimes the whisper mimicked voices I knew. My mother, an old friend from college, even my own voice, urging me in the tone I used when giving myself advice. I tried drowning it out with music, podcasts, television. Nothing worked. The whisper always threaded through. That night I dreamed of the procession again. The passengers shuffled forward one by one, but this time they weren't strangers. They were people I knew. Co-workers, neighbors, my sister. Each one turned to look at me with that wet, glassy stare, and in unison they said, "You promised." I woke up with tears on my face and the ticket clenched in my fist, though I hadn't gone to bed holding it. The cracks in reality by the 5th day, I stopped pretending I was sane. Every reflective surface became a trap. In a window, I'd see the blurred outline of a train steaming past. Car after endless car, all black, with faces pressed against the windows. In the bathroom mirror at work, I saw myself in the conductor's uniform, cap low, smile wide, eyes hollow. My phone glitched. Calls dropped. Texts sent themselves. I checked my outgoing messages one night and found a draft I had no memory of writing. Come with me. Midnight. The train is almost here. It had been addressed to my sister. I threw the phone across the room. It didn't break. Instead, the screen lit up on its own. A single word appeared. 7. The breaking point, I stopped answering calls. I stopped showing up at work. Every day I spent staring at the ticket, willing it to burn itself away. But the more I stared, the clearer the ink became. The date underneath my name pulsed brighter, as if alive. I tried destroying it. Matches. A lighter. The paper would not catch. I tried tearing it. The edges cut my fingers like razors but didn't rip. The blood smeared across the ink and sank in as though the ticket drank it. And that night, when I collapsed into exhausted sleep, I dreamed again. Not of strangers, not of acquaintances, but of one person. Her face, my sister's face. The whisper no longer asked me to choose. It told me the choice had already been made. When I woke, the wall of my bedroom bore a new message in that same greasy, coal-black substance. 6 days. The unwelcome. Guessed on the 5th day before the deadline, my sister called. Her voice was bright, familiar. Haven't heard from you in a while. You okay? I nearly dropped the phone. My chest felt squeezed by invisible hands. I wanted to scream at her to stay away, to never come near me or my house again. Instead, I heard my own mouth say, calmly, gently, "Yeah, come over. I'll explain everything." I hung up before I realized what I'd done. When the call log confirmed the words had left my lips, I collapsed onto the floor. I clawed at my throat, convinced something had spoken through me. My voice, my tone, but not my will. That night I moved through the house like a prisoner. Every corner seemed to hide her silhouette, though she hadn't arrived yet. The whispers changed. They no longer coaxed. They laughed. You've chosen. You've chosen. The house shifts on. The fourth day, the house itself began to change. The floors no longer creaked randomly. They thudded, like footsteps pacing back and forth just out of sight. The wallpaper curled away from the walls in long strips, revealing wood beneath etched with scratches that formed symbols I didn't recognize. And the mirrors. Oh God, the mirrors. I covered them with sheets, with towels, with duct tape, but the reflections bled through. Even with blankets draped over them, faint figures pressed their faces against the glass from the other side. I couldn't make out details, but I could feel the hunger in their stares. When I tried to smash one, the hammer bounced back as if the surface were steel. The reflection rippled like water instead, and from within I saw my own face grin at me. A grin I did not make. The arrival. 3 days left. She arrived. My sister pulled up the driveway in her little sedan, waving at me from behind the glass. My heart lurched into my throat. I ran outside, waving my arms, screaming for her to turn around. She only laughed, thinking I was joking, and stepped out with a smile. She had a bag of groceries with her. "Thought you could use a home-cooked meal," she said. I wanted to hug her. I wanted to shove her back into the car and slam the door. But when I tried to form words, nothing came out. My throat closed like a vice. The only thing I could do was lead her inside. The ticket in my pocket pulsed so violently it hurt. The clock ticks louder. That night I didn't sleep. She curled up on the couch, blissfully unaware, while I sat upright in a chair watching the shadows crawl across the ceiling. At midnight, the sound returned. The deep rumble of iron wheels on tracks buried beneath the house. The floor vibrated. The air thickened with coal smoke. I saw the faint outline of the door again, shimmering against the wall. The door to the station. The door to the train. And when I blinked, my sister was no longer on the couch. She was standing in line with the others. Silent passengers. Heads bowed, waiting. I leapt up, heart slamming against my ribs. But in an instant, she was back, sleeping peacefully, groceries still in the kitchen bag beside her. The whisper coiled into my ear, softer than breath. 2 days. The breaking. The second to last day, I lost control entirely. My sister went to take a shower, and as I stood outside the bathroom door, I felt the ticket lift itself from my pocket and press against my palm. The ink shimmered, alive. A new line of text had appeared beneath my name. Passenger. Sarah. Her name. I screamed. I tore at the paper, bit it, slammed it against the sink faucet to drown it. The ticket refused to break. My sister flung open the door, wrapped in a towel, staring at me like I was insane. "What the hell are you doing?" she demanded. I couldn't answer. Behind her, through the steam, I swore I saw the outline of the conductor's cap. That night, the wall bore its final message before the end. 1. The last day felt unreal, like I was moving underwater. Every sound was muffled. Every color washed out. My sister made breakfast, humming, asking if I wanted coffee. I couldn't speak. All I could do was watch her move, imagining her in that line of passengers, her face slack, her eyes hollow. I wanted to run, to drag her out of the house, drive until the world disappeared behind us. But I knew, deep down, that it wouldn't matter. The train would follow. The ticket would burn through my skin until I delivered what it demanded. The countdown as night fell. The walls vibrated again. This time, the sound didn't build slowly. It came all at once. The entire house shuddered as though an earthquake tore through the foundation. My sister screamed, dropping a glass that shattered on the kitchen floor. "What the hell is happening?" She shouted, but my voice was locked in my throat. The hum rose, a constant thunder. Coal smoke bled from the cracks in the walls, choking the air. And then the wall dissolved, revealing the same platform I had seen before. The station, endless and gray, lit by flickering lamps. The line of passengers waited, silent, motionless. And standing at the front, lantern held high, was the conductor. His grin stretched too wide, eyes glimmering like polished brass. He tipped his cap toward me. It's time. The choice. I tried to grab my sister, to push her out the door, but my arms locked stiff at my sides. My feet carried me forward against my will, closer to the platform. She screamed my name, grabbing at me, but her hands slid through me like mist. The ticket in my pocket burned hot. I pulled it free, and there it was. My name, the date, and beneath it, written in perfect black ink. Passenger, Sarah. The conductor's grin widened. "Hand her over," I screamed. "No! Take me instead." But the conductor only shook his head slowly, as though pitying me. It doesn't work that way. A promise is a promise. My sister's body went rigid. Her eyes rolled back. She was lifted, slowly, impossibly, into the air as though strings pulled her. Her lips parted, but no sound came. I lunged for her, clawed at the invisible pull, but the moment I touched her, my skin blistered with burns. I fell back, screaming, while she drifted forward into the line of passengers. Her face changed. The warmth drained from it. Her eyes dulled, her mouth slackened. She lowered her head and joined the others. I howled until my throat tore. The departure, the conductor raised his lantern, and the ground trembled as the train screeched into existence. Black iron wheels grinding against rails that split the floorboards. The cars rattled, endless, windows filled with pale, lifeless faces. One by one, the passengers boarded, my sister among them. When the last had entered, the conductor turned to me. His grin had softened into something worse. Satisfaction. "You've kept your word. The house will not take you. This time," he tipped his cap, and with a final blast of the whistle that shattered the glass in every window, the train lurched forward and vanished into nothing. The platform, the passengers, the smoke, all gone. I collapsed onto the floorboards of my ruined house, sobbing. The only thing left behind was the ticket, lying in the dust. The aftermath, I picked it up with shaking hands. For the first time, the paper tore easily, but inside was another slip, fresh and clean, with new ink already written across it. It bore today's date. Beneath it, a new line, "Passenger, to be determined." My vision blurred. I screamed and ripped it again and again, but each scrap only multiplied into more slips, all with the same message. Soon I was surrounded, drowning in tickets, the words crawling over one another. To be determined. To be determined. To be determined. The truth, that was months ago. I don't sleep anymore. I don't eat much. Every time I close my eyes, I hear the whistle in the distance. The tickets never go away. No matter how many I burn, tear, drown, or bury, they return, stuffed in my pockets, tucked under my pillow, waiting in the fridge, folded neatly inside unopened mail, and each one still carries that line. Passenger, To be determined. I don't know when the train will return. I don't know who it will demand next. Maybe I'll fight harder. Maybe I'll surrender sooner. But I do know this. The whistle is getting louder again. And if you're hearing my voice now, if you've stayed with me this long, maybe you've already been chosen.